Good morning, YouTube. We have a switch up session today as we have a bit of a time crunch. So we've got leg day in the fitness center today. So we're going to be working on more general equipment, stuff that we can definitely get a session in with, but we're obviously going to be bare bones. We're not going to be at the gym. So a little bit of a switch up in terms of what we would be getting in leg day, but we're going to get all of our normal patterns in, we're going to get all of our normal exercises in, which I'm very fortunate to have a fitness center that has some good equipment in it. So we're starting off our day as we usually do with a calf raise variation, get some active dorsiflexion, and then we'll hit some hip thrusts today. We haven't been doing much glute work, as you've kind of seen. We've obviously been doing an RDL, which is good glute, but we're going to actually do some specific hip thrusting as well. So, So, just because we're in a bit of a time crunch, we decided not to use that time in terms of the drive, so that's fine. But one thing that I want to kind of talk about in today's lift is this kind of thought process around optimal training. I put a post up a couple of weeks ago on TikTok about optimal training and what that really actually means. Because training optimally would suggest that there is only one way of doing something, when we know many roads lead to Rome in terms of training and how people respond to training as well. So doing a calf raise in a leg press machine could be considered optimal, but then also you could do a calf raise in a standing machine. You could also hold dumbbells, you could do it in a Smith. You see, the pattern is what's optimal in a sense, the range of motion and then the load that you're getting under, and that can be achieved in many different variations. And that's where I think people miss the mark with optimal training, because they think that there's just one variation that is king because it works for them. But the thing is, in their experiment, their case study, they haven't gone back and run a crossover design where they do exactly the opposite exercise and see what gains they get. So when we talk about kind of optimal and suboptimal, I think it's a lot more opinion on the construct than it is actually because there is such a thing as a suboptimal exercise. So we'll get into our next exercise right now, set up for some hip thrusts. We have the Nautilus glute drive, which is a fun little bit of kit to have, honestly, in a complex fitness center. So got some nice little bit of equipment in here, and we haven't really done much of thrusting or anything like that. We know that this trains the glutes in a bit more of the shortened position, but I like to hit the full range on these, especially as the weight in here doesn't go too heavy. Alright, we'll do a quick add and then we'll do 2 main sets. So another thing that's been kind of taking the internet by storm is this thought process of time under tension. Now, we'll see quite a lot in the bodybuilding community of this focused on time under tension, right? Control the eccentrics. And so we talked about this yesterday, I think, a little bit, in terms of like the eccentric still being important and the control of that being important. Now, there is a bit of a caveat, and that is we probably don't want to do too long of a tempo. And if you think about it, let's say we did a 8-second eccentric there seems to be evidence to show that like that doesn't really matter. But also the repetition time itself, I think that there still needs to be some form of control in there, an explosive concentric action, and probably an isometric hold in either the top or the bottom position, depending on where the resistance profile is. So in terms of like this, for example, in the stretch position, in the bottom position, there's not that much load if I touch the floor and I bottom out and it's kind of being controlled by gravity. But actually I can still hold an isometric in that position. Now, is it gonna promote glute growth as much as holding that isometric in the hip extended position? Probably not. But the thing is, we should probably think about that little focus squeeze or that focus stretch depending on where we're at. So that's why, for example, I think that people in like lat pull downs will say, don't fully lock out the elbows and stuff, keep some tension on the lats. And what they're referring to there is performing an isometric in the lengthened position. So that's why they're thinking that that will promote more growth, because that technically, by theory, increases the time under tension. But actually, we should probably call it time under contraction or time under repetition, I think is a better word, because we're not really directly measuring tension, and we know kind of as we slow things down that actually we control the force, so we don't always produce as much force, so the mechanical tension profile could change. But with that all said, end of the day, if we just do things that are controlled in the eccentric, have some squeezes in there, have some holds in the different lengthened positions, and then we have a fairly fast and violent concentric, we're going to get muscle growth. Whether it again is optimal remains up for debate, because what the hell is optimal anyway? So that right there is exactly what I would be looking for in terms of most types of contractions and movements. Slow the descent, especially in an exercise where the lengthened position resistance profile isn't that great. Let's just still try and get something out of it. Let's not just discount it, free fall down. Let's do it with control. We're going to be safe if we did free fall down, but who cares? Get that isometric in the top position, nice and explosive in the concentric hip extension. Perfect repetition right there. So I have one more set of these. Again, we haven't really seen them too much in my program, because a lot of times when I have done some accessory glute work, it's normally been on the cable stacks in a PM session, and I haven't always recorded the PM sessions. I'll try and do that a little bit more, but honestly, when I'm in this fitness center and I'm doing these PM sessions, it does get crowded sometimes, so I do feel a little bit awkward because of the space, setting up the camera and recording, because it takes up potentially an area of which somebody else could be using. So it's a bit of an excuse, but you can rest easy. I'm definitely doing it, and I'm also applying BFR there as well, as you've seen before. So we recently had a video where Lyle McDonald went through hypertrophy, and honestly, Lyle, I think, is the OG of science-based lifting, and there are a lot of people who are obviously Lyle fans out there, but I think there's a lot of newer science-based lifters who probably don't even know who that name is. So I suggest going and watching Lyle's channel. But one of the things that rang true to me within some of Lyle's stuff was that still, even with the evidence we have to embrace that, like, we're interpreting the evidence, and so we put our finger on the pulse of what we think is the right thing to do. So, for example, resting. Lyle talked about, for certain exercises, a minute might be okay. For other exercises, 2 minutes might be okay. The thing is, 3 minutes might be more okay for some people, while a minute 30 might be even better for some people. What we don't know is individual responses based on cardiovascular system function, how quickly that recovers between sets. Can people get resynthesis of things like phosphocreatine and things and shuttling more quicker? How the muscle deals with fatigue in terms of that calcium ion buildup and then that dissipation there. Again, generally speaking, better trained individuals will have a better shuttling process there, but fatigue can still catch up on them because they generally push their intensities a lot higher than newer lifters, right? Go into failure and things like that. So the thing is, we don't know exactly how much rest somebody should take, but at the same time, we know that there's an ample amount of rest somewhere and there might be more rest somewhere else. So he talked about kind of some of the old school mechanisms of rest, because people didn't have phones, so they did less rest. So it could have been suboptimal back then, which is kind of an interesting thing because you do see people going on the phones for quite a lot of time now in the gym. All right, so we are leaving some reps in the tank with this one because we have got squats, so I don't want the glutes to be completely blasted before going into our squat pattern. So we got Smith machine squats. We haven't done this in the program because we've typically been hack squatting or pendulum squatting. But little further set, we'll hit one working set. Second set. This feels infinitely harder than pendulum squat, that's for sure. That's good. All right. Seated leg curl. The resistance profile on this machine is way nicer than the others that we typically use. So you notice a slightly higher repetition volume in today's session, and that's a bit of a consequence of weight, but we're also in this phase right now where we're just going to hit some higher volume for a couple of weeks, some accumulation before we go back down into kind of our 6 to 8 range. So that's kind of the thought process there. We'll hit one more set here, and then we'll go from there. We do have single leg hamstring that I was supposed to do first, so we're going to do it second instead now. Alright. Didn't even realize I had the recording on. So, we hit single leg. Flip this over, and then we've got knee extension. I don't know why that's broke. Single leg extensions. Now, often when I come in here, I actually start with this rather than doing the squats, but because I'm trying to get as close to the program as what I had planned, I decided to go and do this. All right. A little rest. So I was thinking 2-set theme, higher volume. Could we add a set? Maybe. But who cares about that stuff? And remember when we were talking about rest periods? Now, to Lyle's point about higher repetition, you can potentially sometimes get away with a shorter rest. Normally the higher repetition comes with a bit of more metabolic fatigue. So again, if you can shuttle that effectively, use your aerobic system, then you probably can get away with shorter rest. Now, my other caveat is side to side, as long as the central nervous system fatigue is dissipated, which is transient throughout a lift, but we just finished on the right side. So the left side technically wasn't working at the muscular level. So in terms of that, it's more so the rate coding, the neural drive, that might be the limiting factor for the next set for the left side. So once we get into a recovered state, then we can go again. So we don't necessarily have to take 3 minutes rest between sides. What we can do is do 1:30, because the effective work time compounds into that, so it could take it up to about 2 minutes. So that's where we can go into this next set a little quicker. that's it. That's our session done for today, because we have to do a pretty quick one as we got to get on the road. So we'll see you in the next video. We got an off day tomorrow.